Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X-Men number 7, cover dated April 1992. The cover is entirely by Jim Lee, penciling and inking himself. It is a pretty simple design for this cover. We've got the implication that Wolverine and Omega Red are two sides of the same coin or mirror images of each other. This would have been an easy cover to put together by Jim Lee. Probably drew Wolverine's face on one page, Omega Red's on the other, overlaid one over the other one, and then worked out this little rip down the middle between the pair, and then just inked the blue line pencils. That's my guess in terms of how this cover was put together. I think the most effective aspect of the cover is the color scheme, is those reds and pinks and a little hint of magenta as well. That's really what makes the cover eye-catching for a reader, and back in the day for me. Now I want you to pay attention to the hatch marks on this particular cover. As I said, this is inked by Jim Lee. And you can see like these little hook hatches here, and we see those on some interior pages, which make me think that Art Thibert didn't ink all the pages or finish all the art inside. That again, there was a bit of a deadline rush on this particular issue, and that Jim Lee may have inked himself. That's something he did in the past, and I have a feeling he was doing it again. So I'm going to point out those pages that I have my suspicions that Jim Lee is inking himself at speed on those particular pages. So let's open this one up to the splash page. It's mostly a splash page with a little inset panel here with a tight close-up on Wolverine. And this is an ambitious angle on Wolverine here as he is manacled and high above Dr. Cornelius and Matsuo Tsurayaba. Now, because of the fact that Jim Lee is not doing full pencils, I feel, excuse me, that it might be the origin of a little perspective error here. So you see the side of, excuse me, Wolverine's thigh here. It seems to be way too high, not attached to his hip. I'd say if Jim Lee was doing full pencils and he had time to correct himself, he probably would have corrected that or required it to be corrected in the inks. So the credits here, Jim Lee, plot and breakdowns. So Jim Lee fully responsible for the story here. My feeling is that this particular storyline that began in issue number 4 and that has continued through 5 and 6 is one issue too long. I feel that Jim Lee's pacing was off for this storyline. It just hung around way too long. And you can see also, and I'll point it out at the end of the video for the last 2 pages of the issue at the end of the video, that I feel there's another pacing issue on them. It's a very rushed ending is what I'll say. Not so much in the art, well the art is done at speed, but more particularly just the fact that a lot is crammed into the last 2 pages, and it's an indication that there is a problem with pacing. That wasn't something that occurred when Chris Claremont was doing the plotting, excuse me, but it is a problem here for Jim Lee on this 4-issue storyline. Art Thibert on finishes, that means that Jim Lee is handing over rough breakdowns, and Thibert is really responsible for fleshing out some of the detail on the pages. Scott Lobdell dialogue, Tom Orzechowski lettering, and Joe Rosas coloring. So Scott Lobdell only responsible for adding the words here, the narrative captions and the dialogue, not at all responsible for any of the story or the pacing of the story. So you can see characteristic of Thibert's inking here is that it's very loose. You see it most particularly with the hatching and cross-hatching here on the close-up on Logan's face. Probably Thibert also working to a tight deadline as well. So you get a little bit of reiteration of what's gone on in previous issues. What's happening is Omega Red here, nice reverse shot of him. Good perspective in this particular anchor image. Omega Red is, they need to get this carbonadium synthesizer for him. Carbonadium, it's explained later in the issue, is a more malleable form of adamantium, or it's a malleable metallic alternative to adamantium, is maybe a better way of putting it. And Omega Red needs it in order to survive and live, and it has a kind of like an impact on his mutant pheromone death factor. It helps him live, so that's what's going on. Excuse me, that's what's going on there. I really like the perspective here on Psylocke, the way that she's standing there. So Jim Lee definitely gridding out this particular image here, this establishing shot of the laboratory that Dr. Cornelius is working on Logan in. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to access his memories and find out what happened to the carbonadium synthesizer from 30 years ago. So here we have the doctor turning up the dial on Logan. Matsuo Tsurayaba is able to monitor Logan's memories, so he's getting a kind of a video feed of this memory of Logan's from 30 years previous in East Berlin, in the former East Berlin, and he's there with this special ops team that includes Maverick here, and we get a surname for him, North, and also Victor Creed, aka Sabretooth. So here we get a close-up on the three of them. We never get to see Maverick's face in this particular storyline. And what's going on here is they're just going through some business about how they're trying to get the doctor out of there. Janice Hollenbach, will learn her surname a little later in the issue, and how they're going after the carbonadium synthesizer because it's important for the USSR's super soldier process. So this is Arcady, this is Omega Red, as he's being transformed into this version of himself. So Creed is ready to go in and give Omega Red a big old happy birthday. So it's game time, but the scene switches somewhere within the walls of the German stronghold in East Berlin. It's the present, and we have a good anchor image here of Sabretooth and a couple of these hand ninjas carrying an apparently unconscious Maverick in the present day, remember, to the laboratory for questioning. And Sabretooth is repeating words that he said in the previous issue. Nobody told me the kid was out of sorts, practically keeled over before I got the chance to bruise him. So he's been repeating that incessantly, and one of the hand ninjas says, why are you doing that? It kind of seems sort of like gloating in a way, sir. Course, nothing wrong with a little gloating. So they're getting suspicious, and Maverick here is not unconscious. He's conscious and he's playing possum. And Sabretooth continues, nobody told me the kid was out of sorts. And you can see here in particular on this page that what Thibert is doing with the rough breakdowns from Jim Lee. So you've got that very loose hatching and cross-hatching there on the anatomy of Sabretooth's thigh and leg here in particular. It's very clear to see it. So yeah, that's what's going on there. I don't mind it too much, to be honest with you. And then we have a little bit more business up here with Tsurayaba demanding that Dr. Cornelius really ratchet up the pressure on Logan. Cornelius is protesting that if they if they ratchet it up, they're going to kill him. And he basically whispers to himself here, forgive me, Logan, you've already suffered much at my hands. And we would have seen all of that in Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X from the previous year, as it was published in 14 parts and serialized in Marvel Comics Presents. And you'll find my reviews of Weapon X here on the channel as well in the back catalogue. So another nice full page image here of Logan manacled, and we've got a little use of a screen tone here on those big metallic manacles that his arms and legs are restrained in, and in the spaces between his anatomy we've got these flashbacks, his memories, and we have the aftermath of the mission in which Sabretooth shot the doctor, killed her, and Sabretooth is saying, we've set back the Soviet super soldier program by some 30 years. That ought to make this mission worth it. And Logan here, skeptical, saying worth it depends on who you ask. And then very quietly he says, Janice, darling, I got one last assignment for you. So what could that final assignment be? She's dead. She is a corpse. So what could it be? Well, we'll see obviously at the end of the issue what that final assignment was. So then we're back in the laboratory. Matsuo Tsurayaba gloating here. He reckons he knows the location of the carbonadium synthesizer. A little bit about the upstarts competition here between him and the von Strucker twins. And then he gives the order to Dr. Cornelius to kill Wolverine. And in the narrative captions we get a little explanation here regarding, little reference to the Weapon X program, and how Cornelius feels in a perverse sort of way that by killing Wolverine, he's somehow making amends for having transformed him into that adamantium laced skeleton killer in the Weapon X program. But now, a surprise, Psylocke turns out to not be under Matsuo Tsuruyaba's control, and here in her dialogue she conveniently explains to the villains and to readers what happened. With the information now secured by the psychic bond we share, that's with Wolverine, your services are no longer required. It was Wolverine's near death that freed me from Matsuo's mental trawl. I have been waiting for the moment to strike. Well, thanks for explaining that, Psylocke. Even so, that's a nice pose and anchor image of her taking out both Omega Red and Tsuruyaba with those blades. A nice close-up there on Omega Red saying, I hope it was worth it. He lashes out at her with his carbonadium tentacles, but they have no effect. She says that her psychic powers have been able to flow the stem of his mutant death factor, and we're going to get another explanation from her as to how that could be. So she says, I had you psionically convinced you actually released your death-inducing ability. And he retorts and says, then the life essence I've been draining from you to sustain my own, a figment of your imagination, she says. But just for the record, the piercing sensation in your left lung, that's genuine. I like that little bit of dialogue from Scott Lobdell. And here in the background, we still have Logan's memories playing out on the video capture of his memories. So this is interesting. Omega Red knocks into the contraption that is imprisoning Logan. That will play a part a little later on. And Logan here conscious, and Dr. Cornelius sweating. I like the little indication of sweat there as he's worried about Wolverine breaking free. So he hits the alarm. And now outside with the alarm going, we see that Maverick is making his move. He frees himself from the bonds that the ninjas have put him in. He is a practical guy, so when the ninja doesn't tell him the answer that he wants in terms of the location of the X-Men, he basically shoots him dead and turns to the other ninja looking for the floor number, and the guy responds 7. This is kind of a comical bit here where he shoots him 6 times and then he says, there you go, I owe you one. So then we get an explanation of what's going on with Sabretooth. Maverick twigged that he's under Psylocke's mental command, and it's all against his will. Sabretooth confirms here. Now, it's this particular page, also this one, you see that mark making there, the bruise on the ninja's cheek? That doesn't look like Art Thibert. Similarly on this page, it doesn't really look like Art Thibert. This page looks like Jim Lee to me, like he's inking himself. Again, the line markings are much like the cover. This particular page, it could be him. I'm not 100% sure of that. I think it is him on this page and this page. Those are my guesses anyway. So now Maverick is backed up by Sabretooth under Psylocke's mental control. Psylocke uses her the focused totality of her telepathic powers. Her psychic knife plunges it into the back of Andrea von Strucker's head and says here, now that I have everyone's attention. Another nice anchor image here, this one inked by Thibert for sure. She says, I'm honor bound to avoid any unnecessary violence by offering anyone this opportunity to surrender. Of course, nobody's going to surrender. Interesting little screen tone there in the fabric pattern of Andreas's suit. So some attention to detail being paid here. Omega Red talking about the C synthesizer. Nice 3 panels here where Psylocke is about to attack him again, but she's knocked out by Tsuruyaba. So Tsuruyaba has martial arts training. He is a physically formidable foe. That's often forgotten about because usually he works strategically using the hand as his actors rather than him himself. But he does have some skills, so he knocks Psylocke out and he's here threatening to kill her. So that's a nice little sequence at the bottom of the page. I feel some good storytelling there from Jim Lee and the panel to panel flow. Now this is another page that is definitely not inked by Art Thibert. The marks are not Thibert's marks. I'm not 100% sure if this is Jim Lee or not. My feeling is it isn't Jim Lee on this particular page, even though the marks on Beast's face do look like Lee, but some of the other marks on the page don't look like Jim Lee. So I'm not 100% certain. Like those hatch lines on Sabretooth's face, it doesn't look like Jim Lee's work. Similarly over here as well, the ink is fairly thick on the lines. I'm not 100% sure who's inking this particular page. In any case, Maverick works to free the X-Men, but Sabretooth here is now freed of Psylocke's psionic control after Matsuo Tsurayaba knocking her out. So Maverick's turned his back on Sabretooth, but he's managed to free the Beast from that particular leg manacle, and here Sabretooth strikes Maverick from behind. That's a pretty good anchor image there. Again, this is another page that is not, in my opinion, inked by Art Thibert. The hatch lines and the mark making doesn't look like his style. You can see the contrast. This is an Art Thibert inked page versus this one. Look at those mark makings on that tight 3/4 profile, reverse profile on Sabretooth's face there. Doesn't look like Thibert at all. I'm not 100% sure who it is. It could be Jim Lee. Some of the mark making here on Sabretooth's muscles on his leg does look a little bit like Jim Lee. So it could be Jim Lee, but I won't swear to that one. So Jubilee here striking out at Sabretooth using her plasma spheres. And then we switch back to the laboratory. Matsuo Tsurayaba standing over Psylocke. I do like that top-down angle. Wolverine here is getting ready to break free from that manacle. You can see him cracking it there and basically saying 300 pounds of adamantium skeleton with claws, countless hours of training in a danger room, and you've the nerve to call that nothing. So tell me, he says. That's a nice image of him breaking free. Tell me, he says, what does it take to impress you people? That's another nice anchor image there as well of Wolverine ferociously clawing into Omega Red. So remember, Omega Red has been weakened because his death factor wasn't funneling life essence from Psylocke. So now it's more of a fair fight between a weakened Wolverine and a weakened Omega Red. And then who is blasted through the door? Well, that's a familiar red optic blast there, except for Sabretooth. So the party is getting bigger, and that's a really nice anchor image there of the blue team with Maverick there in the background. So obviously some care taken over this particular image. Again, I do not think that this is Art Thibert inking this particular page, but it could be. Some of the mark making on Gambit's coat there, it does look a little bit like him, but some of the other mark making looks a little bit more like Jim Lee. So you know, I'm not 100% certain who is fully responsible for this particular page. This page too, definitely not Art Thibert. I'm absolutely 100% convinced Art Thibert did not ink this page. This looks a bit like Jim Lee's inks, maybe at speed. These little kind of little screen tone, little dots of screen tone here and in this one conveying the energy blast effect. That is something that I've seen Jim Lee use. When he does ink himself, it's like it's some screen tone that he has, you know, in his personal possession and he's using there. So this could well be a Jim Lee ink page, but at great speed. In particular, this bottom panel looks like it was done quite quickly. And so what's happened here is Rogue gets the better of Omega Red. Remember, a Rogue is super strong and also invulnerable. So she's a really serious foe for the likes of Omega Red. And then there's an explosion, the machinery's exploding, the laboratory's about to blow entirely. There's a whole load of chemicals in the building, so Maverick reckons that they should all get out quick. So Omega Red here escaping with Dr. Cornelius and Matsuo Tsurayaba. Cyclops blows a hole in the roof, and then they're pulled up into the Blackbird. So what was the story with the Blackbird there? Who would have been there? Who would have been piloting it? It must have been on autopilot, hovering there. A little bit of a kind of a narrative continuity issue. Interesting that. In any case, they get away. They fly off in the Blackbird. And then we have a little switch of scene to Mojo's world. So this is a subplot that Jim Lee has been developing over the previous couple of issues. And here we have the implication that there was an uprising against Mojo, that it failed. It was led by Longshot. Lila Cheney was involved, and Dazzler here is observing the aftermath of the failed rebellion, and she thinks to herself behind this pillar, we almost took him with an army of dedicated soldiers and a couple of rusty X-Men. Maybe it's time to see how well he fares against a trio of soldiers and an army of X-Men. Okay, so that's going to get explored in issues 10 and 11 upcoming. Later at the German embassy, we have a wrap-up here. This page 2, I'm just not 100% certain that it's inked by Art Thibert. The mark making doesn't look like him, but I'm not confident to say who is inking this particular page. Again, it could be Jim Lee, but working at speed. And basically Logan here isn't going to go back to New York with the X-Men because he says he's got a few loose ends to tie up. That's an opportunity for Cyclops to say that if he needs the X-Men, just give them a call and they'll lend him a hand. And Wolverine here says, it's funny, before joining this group, there wasn't a scrap I couldn't claw my way out of solo. That much ain't changed, but it's comforting to know I got friends, family, even covering my back. Now, that's something that Wolverine, has been well aware of for years. So it's a little bit odd coming from him there in the dialogue. And then the scene switches to a cemetery on the outskirts of Berlin. And Dr. Cornelius saying this is sacrilege, so a grave is being dug up. Matsuo Tsurayaba saying it's the least of his crimes. The ninjas there are digging away. And then they raise the coffin. But out of the coffin, we get Wolverine's gloved hand and those deadly adamantium claws, which he uses to slice off Tsurayaba's hand. So, a little irony there that the head of the hand loses his hand, eh? And but you can see what I said earlier about how rushed the ending is. We've got 8 panels on this particular page, and we've got 12 on this one. So there's a fair bit of action here that is being dealt with very speedily on these last 2 pages, and these are pages 22 and 23 of the story. There's no letters page here, so I really feel that this issue was the story wasn't well paced out. Like I've said before on a much earlier video review of this particular issue, that I feel that what's happening here, Wolverine busting out of the coffin, slicing off Tsurayaba's hand, that if Jim Lee had the space, he would do an anchor image for that particular action. But there just isn't the space here. And then we get the really tight wrap up here with Cornelius pulling a gun on Logan and getting the order to shoot him. But Cornelius is shot in the head from behind by Maverick there, who's standing in the shadows on that rainy night. And Maverick said, Wolverine asks him whether a flesh wound couldn't have done the job. Maverick just responds, might have, but it wouldn't have been nearly as dramatic. So this is bad luck for Wolverine, but he doesn't know that Dr. Cornelius was involved in the Weapon X program. He's no memory of the Weapon X program, and he's unaware of what a kind of a link to his past he's lost there. But Maverick knows. So Maverick removing Cornelius and not wanting Logan to learn about the Weapon X program. But Logan here, it's revealed that the last job he had for Janice was to hide the carbonadium synthesizer. So he hid it either in her body or in her coffin. Must have been the body, must have been the corpse. So the corpse would have rotted after 30 years. So the synthesizer's there. He throws it to Maverick, who catches it. And Maverick says that he's given Logan some information. He's passed information on regarding your former comrade. And that's a story that gets picked up in Marvel Comics Presents 101. Who's that former comrade? My guess is that it's Sabretooth, maybe. Is demonstrative of my gratitude, but then Logan's gone, just like Batman. He's gone again. How did I know that was going to happen? And that's it. So it's a very speedy wrap-up, a very sudden and almost surprising killing of Dr. Cornelius there, a pivotal character in Weapon X. But the implication being that Maverick doesn't want Logan to learn about the Weapon X program and the origin of his adamantium skeleton and all of that. And like I said, no letters page. So look, this 4-part storyline, it's only okay. Really at this point, the loss of Chris Claremont for the quality of the stories is felt. And also my opinion is that Jim Lee didn't pace out this story as well as he might have. This should have been a 2-parter story, 3 parts at the longest, but 4 parts was just stretching it way too long. And yeah, there was definite pacing issues there at the very end of this issue too. Clearly the art also under time pressure, and you just don't have the same quality of art that there was back in issue 4, which was inked by Scott Williams. So there's a diminution in the overall quality of the comic, but still entertaining, still got nostalgic value for me at least. Let me know your thoughts on this particular issue way back when in 1992 when you first read it, if you did then, and also what your feelings and thoughts about it in the present day are. And if you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.